Check this out. I've got the FIFINE AM8 dynamic microphone, and we're gonna test it out today and see what it has to offer. Now, when I first took this microphone out of the box, I was a bit surprised by the very light weight to it because it does have a plastic housing around the outside, but I wasn't gonna let that stop me from diving a little bit deeper and checking this thing out. Now, the microphone has a very nice, clean look to the outside. I do really enjoy the minimalist look to it. It's nice and simple. It has a few very simple touch buttons on the outside and a couple of knobs to control both your gain and your headphone volume, with your different ports on the back being your XLR input, your USB input, and your headphone port to listen to your own audio. Now, although this does have a nice little screw-on base where you can set this thing up as a nice desktop mount to get started recording right off the bat, it is recommended with most microphones to hook it up to something like a boom arm like we have here. And when I was first starting to hook this thing up to my boom arm, I got into a little bit of a situation where I was kind of disappointed, and once I screwed the microphone stand all the way down to my microphone, there was no longer a dual swivel point where I only have one point of rotation on the microphone here. So I was a little bit disappointed to not see a secondary swivel so that I can get full rotation to articulate the microphone where I want it to be. But at the end of the day, a lot of the stands that you have an adjustable ring and things on the boom arm that allows you to sort of position the microphone where you want it. And it wasn't too big of an issue, but it was sort of a little bit of a convenience factor that I was kind of missing out on when I first set this thing up on my boom arm. Now, like most XLR microphones, this thing hooked up and plugged right in super easily. Just plug in an XLR and pick your interface of choice. I already have a few different XLR interfaces here. Currently, we're going through a XLR Zoom recording device. However, I did test this out quite a bit throughout the past week or so while I was live streaming and gaming through my Wave XLR interface as well. Even though I may have been a little bit disappointed up to this point, I was very impressed when I first plugged this thing in and listened to how it sounded. Because honestly, I'm not a professional audio guy by any means, but comparing this to the mic that I normally use, which is my Rode pod mic, I could barely tell the difference, and I consider that a very big win for the FIFINE AM8. Now, I do think there's maybe a little bit more of the plosives, the poppy sounds when it comes to using the AM8 versus the pod mic, because from what I understand it, the capsule of this microphone is much closer to the end, which does allow for that to be a little bit more aggressive when you hear the popping, the P sounds, and stuff like that. But if you use the microphone at a little bit of an angle, which is what is recommended on how to use it, so you're not talking directly into it, you're sort of talking past it and picking up those sounds, I think it sounds pretty good. You don't really notice too much of the distracting noises as long as you kind of get it set up and oriented the way that works the best for your voice. And in case you didn't notice already, this whole thing so far has been recorded, the audio from the AM8 here. So let me know down in the comments below what you think the audio quality sounds like with this thing plugged in through XLR. For an audio quality comparison, we'll go ahead and compare a small audio clip here from the Rode pod mic. As I mentioned, this is the one that I typically use in my gaming and streaming setup. So this, I think, has a very similar sound. We're using the same settings here, the same Zoom audio recorder in comparison to the AM8 microphone. This is the Rode pod mic to compare the XLR quality. So like I said, I think the audio quality and the sound profile with my voice at least is very similar from the AM8 to the Rode pod mic here, which I typically use in my gaming and streaming setups. Moving on to some more features from the AM8, because I didn't realize that this was a thing that was even something that brands were doing nowadays, but this is both XLR as well as USB compatible. So we're gonna go ahead and switch this over to USB now and show some extra features that you can actually get by using this through USB connection. Okay, just like that, we are hooked up to the computer here through USB. This is hooked up to a Mac. You should be able to use it with both Mac and Windows. All you have to do is plug it in, pick your device, you pick the microphone for both your input and your output if you want to plug headphones into the back. It does have the auxiliary port on the back. And then you get a couple of additional features now that you're plugged into USB. So you can see here we do have the RGB ring, which is adjustable. You can change the color of that by tapping the little touch panel below here. So we can go and cycle through the different color modes pretty simply there. We also have a mute button on the top here. and by hitting that button you can see it mutes the microphone nice and simply. And then we have the 2 knobs on the bottom here, which one little complaint I have about that is it's kind of difficult to see what you're doing. You kind of have to tilt the microphone up in order to see where your levels are on your gain and your headphone knob. So that's a little bit of a pain, but it's not the end of the world. Once you kind of have things set as far as your gain and your levels go, you shouldn't really need to touch them too much, so it's kind of nice to have them out of the way after you get them set up. But it does come with this nice little stand here, which I think is great if you're going to be traveling or whatever. One of the things that is my favorite about this microphone is that not only can I hook it up to my gaming setup through XLR, get the nice quality and all the flexibility that I want with it, but I could grab it and the USB my laptop and go out wherever I want to. So if I'm traveling, I can just go grab it and throw it in my bag, and I can take it along to do some voiceovers or additional recording or whatever I would need to on the go as well, which is kind of nice to have. Nice long USB cable here. It gives you some pretty good length and flexibility for that. Another tiny little downfall, which I don't really mind too much, is that when you are plugged in through the XLR port, you don't get the features of the USB or the RGB lights, and you don't get the mute button and things along those lines. But in my opinion, when you're hooking up to XLR, you don't really need it because you have all the functionality and control through your XLR interface. Which brings up one other point, that this microphone does not come with any software like a lot of the competitors do. However, I haven't really felt the need for it, honestly. When you plug it in like this directly through your USB, I think it still sounds excellent. I can't really notice personally a difference between the connection between USB and the connection via XLR. I'm sure there is a slight difference, at least I would hope there is, but honestly it still sounds great when you just plug it in just like this to your computer and use it for whatever. So before we get into my final thoughts on this microphone, I want to get a little bit crazy here and try a few things, because as I mentioned, we do have a USB port on the back, we have an XLR port on the back, and we have an auxiliary port on the back. So I'm very curious to see if I can use all 3 of these ports at the same time. So it actually does look like I am now both recording through USB to the computer as well as through XLR at the same time to my XLR interface here. And now I'm able to get the RGB and all that stuff to change colors. The mute button, everything works the same as it would through USB, but I'm also able to capture it through XLR at the same time, which could be a nice feature depending if that's something you're into or not. I don't know if that's useful for other people. I wasn't able to get the auxiliary to go directly into my camera as a microphone input to the camera, directly to the... Let me try again and actually plug it into the right spot on my camera. Okay, so I was corrected. I did not plug it in to the correct spot the first time. As I said headphones, I realized I plugged it in the headphone, not to the microphone. So now we are running directly from the AM8 here into the microphone jack on my camera. So another additional feature that could be quite handy. I am both all 3 recording directly to the computer, directly to my XLR interface, and directly to the camera all at once. So now if I really screwed something up, I have 3 audio tracks recording at the exact same time, which to me, I think is a pretty big advantage. Not only is this thing very affordable, but it's also got a lot of functionality to use for multi-purpose situations, which can be great. So with that, I think I will give my final thoughts on the AM8 dynamic microphone from FIFINE. Even though I was a little bit skeptical off the bat with the plastic exterior and the couple of minor features that weren't exactly living up to my expectations when I first opened the box on this thing, I was very surprised once I plugged it in. The audio quality on it was fantastic, and as you can see, and hopefully you can hear, this thing is definitely able to produce a very usable, high quality sound for anyone, whether you're recording videos, whether you're gaming, streaming. It's very good for a lot of different uses, because as you've just seen, I plugged it in to 3 different devices at the same time and was able to record on all those devices effectively all at once. Even though it doesn't come with its own software like some of the other brands do, it does have some minor adjustments for gain and headphone volume and things, and I really think for the basic starter, just getting going, this microphone has everything you need. It sounds great out of the box, so you don't really need to add a ton of effects or other things to it. Coming in at a very low price of only $57, this microphone being cheaper than many of the competitors, I think is a great start for a lot of people who might just be looking to get into their first microphone or need an upgrade from their headset mic or whatever it is, getting into content creation, streaming, gaming, filmmaking, podcasting. I think it's very useful for a lot of those different things, and I think it is a valuable purchase for the versatility it does have and the good quality that you can get out of such an affordable microphone. If you want to check out the AM8 for yourself, I will leave a link down in the description below. Thank you so much for coming to hang out with me for this microphone review, and I hope to see you again soon. Impressive.